It was meant to be my time. The business bulletin should have repeated my name as the one being recognized. In the congrats letters, I mentioned that I had held the project together for 8 grueling months, despite staff losses and budget cuts. Week after week, weekend after weekend of unappreciated work. I missed sleep, missed anniversaries, missed my niece's dance. I believed in the company. So much so that the night crew at the office began addressing me by name. I believed in the team at work. And I may have been naive enough to believe it all had significance to those in charge. We were in the executive conference room, the one where everyone felt energized by the skyline view and the glass table. I sat 2 seats away from the head of the table, still wearing my fitted blue suit and tie, as if we were engaged in some significant task. Relaxed, just enough to provide a slight sense of comfort. The last review meeting had gone well. The client was satisfied with the numbers. As I described the final measurements, everyone in the room nodded in agreement. I anticipated a handshake, a nod, maybe even a, "Let's talk about next steps." But instead, I received this. Leaning in near Madison Hale, I whispered to Belle, my wife, or at least the person I still called my wife that morning, "Congratulations!" Our HR director's voice was simultaneously velvety and poisonous. "Madison, we're promoting Paul." Her smile followed the words like a knife concealed in lace, and I felt my stomach drop. I looked at Paul, sitting too stiff, trying too hard not to smile, and I worried the floor beneath me might crack. My wife, now rewarding and promoting my thirst trap look, which I used to joke about with Belle. My jaw tightened. But I didn't yell, didn't break. That would have given them exactly what they wanted. Another man breaking down over a title, or worse, over a woman who had already moved on emotionally. I stayed calm, steady. I took out a clean white envelope from my leather briefcase and slid it across the table while I presented my final quarterly update. Everyone turned to look, even Paul. I simply remarked, "Thanks for the opportunity," across the polished table, directly toward Belle. Her smile wavered. Just for a moment. I stood up, buttoned my jacket. No speech, no angry finger-pointing. Just a quiet walk beyond the glass partitions, beyond the faux plants and the self-made timeline posters. Past the corridor where Belle and I used to exchange coffees and late-night strategy meetings. I entered the elevator, alone. As the door slid shut, I took a breath, the kind you take when the air is different, and freedom tastes like smoke. Nobody in that room knew what else I had hidden in that envelope. They assumed it was just a resignation letter, and it was. But behind it was something more. A statement. One that declared the performance optimization algorithm I'd been developing, Mosaic Core, was a replica of my IP claim, developed on private servers, outside business hours, with no Holston metrics resources used. It was stored under a separate LLC, Mosaic Systems. And when placed on the open market, it was good enough to make Belle's petty promotion look like a losing bet. I had entered that meeting knowing things might go south. I had watched the warning signs for weeks. The quiet conversations in the hallway, the avoidance at home, Belle no longer asking about my day, and how she began defending Paul whenever I voiced concerns. Every time I pointed out his missed deadlines, or his shallow reports, she'd call me jealous, possessive. So, I stopped arguing, and I started documenting. I saved email threads, timestamps, team discussions, even meeting transcripts, not because I wanted to sue. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it. That being erased wasn't a sign of delusion. But it was worse than that. Belle wasn't just coaching Paul. She was rebranding him, grooming him to be her next golden boy in a perverse game of corporate chess. I wasn't being sacrificed. I was being erased. Our home life collapsed. Dinner became silence. She smiled at texts she wouldn't explain, scrolled endlessly, and pulled away when I reached for her hand. Our closeness dissolved into vague excuses and late-night whispers. I once suggested a weekend getaway. She replied, without even looking up, "Let's not force something just to say we did." That night I sat in our guest room, staring at mock-ups of Mosaic Core, a system I had spent over a year building in secret. Not just a dashboard, but a living engine. It predicted inefficiencies, suggested action steps in real time, and made traditional reporting look like finger painting. No Holston metrics time or servers were ever used. Every line of code, every session, was logged and time-stamped on encrypted storage. Registered under Mosaic Systems, LLC, I called Jameson, a friend and IP attorney. He reviewed everything, took one look and said, "You have a weapon. Use it carefully." And so I did. While Bell was planning Paul's rise, I was quietly building my legacy and my exit. 2 months later, the beta was live. I demoed it for a mid-size firm that remembered my work from a conference. They were less interested in office drama and more interested in results, the kind Paul could never deliver. I leaned back and smiled. They thought I was walking away from that boardroom. But in truth, I was walking into my sovereignty. They whispered to humiliate me. Instead, they liberated. Me and Belle, she had already traded me in for after-hours texts and performance reviews. She didn't flinch when she discarded me, so I didn't flinch when I disappeared. I sent a lengthy message, then closed my phone without responding. The condo was a modern 2-bedroom apartment that we shared. It had been hers on the weekends, from the marble floors and counters to the windows that looked out over the city. During the week, it was mine for work. We acted as though the breakup was due to scheduling differences, but in reality, it had been about how far apart we could be emotionally before one of us lost it. I had already moved out. She had been unaware of it for weeks. But now that Mosaic Core was attracting public attention and my name had been listed among the top 5 to watch in an industry publication, she suddenly remembered my existence. The condo now became worth bargaining for. I didn't text back. My lawyer, Alicia Briner, scheduled a meeting. We met in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Neutral. Ground Bell arrived late and sat next to me, a manila folder open in front of her, calm, collected, and wonderfully unconcerned. As anticipated, her lawyer followed. Her heels tapped on the shiny floor like the acclaim she believed she deserved. Younger, unsure, and likely unfamiliar with high-conflict marital property cases. Okay, I was prepared. She sat down without looking at me and began speaking. Alicia held up one hand. "We're here to discuss the equity split for the condo, which was bought during the marriage. In fact," she stated, turning the page, "I stayed, even though it wasn't Belle,